one of the great personalities that we get to see and hear from on a weekly basis, Mr. Brandel Chamblee.
Okay.
Pitbull.
Pitbull, yeah. I bet you didn't see that coming.
Do expound.
I couldn't have told you a couple of years ago a single song Pitbull sang, but I saw him in an interview, and I was just captivated by him. I thought he was brilliant. I didn't realize he was so heavily involved in all his philanthropic enterprises, but he said something that really stuck with me when he was asked about why he's been so successful, and he said, I realize that the masses are asses. And he goes, I have 8 seconds to capture somebody, to get somebody's attention. And if I don't do it in that 8 seconds, they'll change the channel. So he goes, when I write my lyrics, I think about that. And I come up with something very catchy, very simple, every 8 seconds in my song. And I thought, wow, I think that has a lot of application to a lot of different ventures, but certainly teaching. And maybe this is crazy to link Pitbull with Harvey Pinnock, but when I was in college, I used to go watch Harvey Pinnock teach. And those two seemed analogous to me. Watching Harvey Pinnock teach was a bit like a Pitbull lyric. It was just as simple as possible. I remember one time, I'll tell this real quick story. Harvey said he was going to go teach this player. I'll come out and watch. He goes, come out and watch. He goes, I'm not going to tell you what I tell him. And then afterwards at lunch, I want you to tell me what you would have told him. I said, all right. So I sat there and, we got out there and the guy had real low hands, real strong grip, funky posture, bent over, took it outside, shut, came over the top, did all these things. Harvey whispered in his ear, and all of those problems went away. And he started hitting the ball much, much better. So afterwards, obviously, I talked about all the things I saw in Harvey. I said, what did you do? And Harvey said, I just told him to raise his hands. And his grip got weaker, his takeaway got better, his golf swing got better, and he started making better contact, swishing the grass or brushing the grass is what Harvey used to say. And I thought, well, I'm a long way from being a teacher.
That's great. I was going to say, we're at the Ryder Cup this year, all the coaches from Europe, all the coaches from the United States one night have a beer together, or two. And we're talking about what we like about golf and how much of we watch golf. So every one of us just obsessively says we watch the Golf Channel all the time. And I can't and don't sleep, too much stuff going on, maybe not as much as Michael Breed has. By the way, Michael Breed said 8 seconds is our time, which was ironic. I think there's been a lot of tie-ins through this. But anyways, we got talking about golf, and then at the end of the day, we got debating announcers and who talked about it. And the consensus for 20 coaches was the guy to my left is the brilliant mind in the game. He's worked as hard to study what we do. His take is his take. It doesn't feel like somebody's in his ear, though I've had the headset on before. I know that somebody is in his ear at some times, or maybe not. But anyways, you're a really special guy, and you've done so much for our sport. And like I said, this is a passion project for me. I think it's a passion project for you, what you do in your job, and the way that you believe in all these people out here that are trying to get better on a daily basis, and then what's going on in the game and why the players are trying to get so much better, and the game is better than ever.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you. I just love golf. When I played golf for a living, I couldn't wait to get up in the morning. I'd wake up before the sun came up, and I'd be out there when the sun came up. I just couldn't wait to go see what was in store, what I was going to find, what I was going to think about. I'd have some breakthrough, and I'm exactly the same way when I get up in the morning and I'm preparing for work. I love it. I cannot wait to get up in the morning, to turn on the computer and to just start digging and to see where the world takes me. And I'm always looking for something that really interests me, and then to see if I can extrapolate that to other areas so that I can share with our audience. Because we're on the air a long, long time. And you can't just say so-and-so won because they were better. That's like saying the ingredients for cake are cake. You know, you pretty much, we got hours to talk about, hours, and you got to fill those up. So, you know, I'm always looking and always digging. But really, it is a labor of love. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. I was thinking about this a lot too this morning. By the way, Jim McLean, Brett McCabe, Marcus Potter, Chris Mason, Michael Breed, Rick Sessinghouse, and Melissa Martin all sound like they lived in the same house in a lot of ways. Pretty interesting. And just knowing him and speaking to him, it's the same thing. So while the thread might be different through all our needles, and that's really important, that it is laws, principles, and preferences, and you got to do your preference, it's pretty cool the way that the theme that we're hearing is to make people better and how they do it. And there's a lot that we can take from that in similarity, which a lot of time in my past when I was younger, you went to one of these, it was an argument with everybody for, you know, I shouldn't stack and tilt or I shouldn't get off the ball. And guys were winning with stack and tilt, and Jimmy Ballard's players were winning as well too. So it's an interesting thing. This is one that I get asked all the time, and I couldn't wait to ask you this question. Your playing career help your broadcasting career, and do you have to be a good player to teach golf, and do you have to be a good player to teach very good players?
Well, I would say that my curiosity has certainly helped me in the endeavor that I'm in right now. I don't know that my curiosity made me a better golfer. You know, when I was in college, I think a lot of people would feel they were a better player when they were in college, but I know for a fact that I hit it higher and I hit it longer when I was in college, and I hit it better, and I never hit it as good as I did on tour as I did when I was in college. And I think some of that had to do with I was always looking, you know, I was always on that hamster wheel. And, you know, you got to get off that hamster wheel, and you got to play, and you got to react. And I know, you know, I came from a family that didn't know anything about golf. Nobody in my family played golf. Nobody, my 5 brothers and sisters, you know, they were abhorred that I was going to try to play golf for a living. You know, how do you make money doing that? Nobody knows anything about golf in my family. But my dad, you know, he said, you know, he talked to some PGA pros when I was growing up, and they would just say to him, and my dad would always reiterate this to me, you know, just always trust in your golf swing, and don't go searching. And so I did do that. I would read incessantly, but I would just go out and mess with my golf swing. Well, once I got on tour, and once you get really good, you know, you have access to a lot of different ideas. And I was always looking. And, you know, before you know it, you can't find your way back home. And I would say I played the better part of my PGA Tour career that way. Now, that certainly helps me do my job because, you know, the first year I started working at Golf Channel was 2004. And if you remember, Tiger Woods had that incredible run, 99 to 2002, really. And then he started changing his golf swing. So the very first year I was in TV, the guy who played the greatest golf that anybody had ever seen was changing that golf swing, which was in my mind the most bizarre thing in the history of sport. But from that moment to now, I have hardly had a show where I wasn't asked about Tiger Woods' golf swing and why he's changing it from that to this. And so you're constantly having to go back and look at the swing he had and what the changes he's making and why it's relevant and why you would do that. And there is no right answer. There is just a never-ending debate about what he did, how he's doing it. And it's pretty much relevant to every other player to lesser degrees because almost everybody is searching for something. You know, that is the great, you know, commonality in this room is we're all looking to be better teachers and better players. And there is misinformation, there is great information, there's everything in between. But the game remains a mystery. I can tell you a million different stories about it, but I'll tell you this one. And it involves we're all adults, but this is Jack Nicklaus telling a friend of mine that he'll never be any good unless he does this one thing. And you know, this is how hard it is to talk golf on TV sometimes because some of the words sound bad, but they're not. They're golf terms, right? But Jack Nicklaus is playing a practice round with a buddy of mine by the name of Kelly Gibson. Anybody in here know Kelly Gibson?
Yeah.
Yeah, New Orleans guy. I used to play a lot of golf with him. Jack was friends with Kelly. He loved Kelly. He loved Glenn Day. He loved Charlie Reimer. Jack just loved sort of, quirky, authentic, low-key sort of guys. So he's out playing with Glenn Day and Kelly Gibson at a practice round and at Doral. And Kelly has a real fast golf swing, hit it real far, and came out of the shot on a par 5, missed it way to the right. And Jack was walking past him, and he said, "You're never going to be any good until you get some downcock." And he just kept walking. And Kelly was like, had no clue what downcock was. And he turned to Glenn Day, he goes, "Well, what is downcock?" And Glenn goes, "I have no idea. I have no idea." He said, so the whole back nine, the two of them debated what it could possibly mean. Was he talking about his golf swing? Was he talking about his nightlife? Was he talking about, what was he making a disparaging comment about his habits? What was it? So when Kelly gets into the locker room, Kelly was a pretty funny guy. And he comes in there, he's like, "Does anybody in here know what downcock means?" And I was like, "Well, we're going to need some context." And that was the gist of it. Jack was trying to tell Kelly, until you get some softness in your set and transition, you're never going to be any good. And that's where we're all at. We're like one comment away from what we think is going to turn our golf game around or make us better teachers, give us a better understanding, connect the dots. But every day, I'm sure everybody in the room is the same. I debate the golf swing, talk about the golf swing with my friends. Most of my best friends are teachers. And to your point about argument, I don't know it's argument. I mean, it is, and the game has been fairly argumentative, but I think it's also fun to debate the golf swing because there are commonalities, but there are, as soon as you throw out an axiom that you think is absolutely dead right, every single person in this room can come up with an exception to that axiom. One of my good friends is a fellow by the name of Lucas Wall, who's had, I think, some success teaching power in the game. He and I never stop arguing about what the lead leg does in the downswing. Never. He wants it to do one thing. I say, no. You're talking about power. I'm talking about accuracy. And he can show me just as many pictures about what the left leg does to his point as I can show him what it does to my point. But neither of us is right. It's there's good and bad examples of both these ideas.
Obvious question, but not one way to skin the cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Bubba Watson hitting balls next to, old Payne Stewart or,
And yet I can find commonalities in those two that I think could serve pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
If you said, how could you sum up your ideal golf swing? For me, it's, I tend to like shots that go high, long, and straight. and I would argue that the longest, straightest shots, the highest shots, I think there are great commonalities there. Whether you're talking about Babe Zaharias or Jack Nicklaus, I think there are great commonalities.
In the club being up, the club being more up. And
width in the backswing, movement off of the ball, high hands. There are a lot of other things that you could dive into as well, but generally speaking, those get my attention. That's not to say that I can't find value and interest in swings that don't hit it as high, don't hit it as long, or don't hit it as straight. Because I can certainly, talk to the cows come home about how great a golf swing Calvin Peete had, or Jim Furyk, or Mo Martin. But generally speaking, what's the hardest thing to do in golf? It's to hit it long and straight. And in my view, there's been very few players that have done that, hit it long and straight, because it's really hard to do.
Yeah. I like, they all use that word icon too much, and are there really icons in what we do? I don't know, that word's a big word, but for me, Eddie Marin's an icon in our business, certainly as a golf professional and a gentleman known throughout the world, and I've been fortunate enough to listen to him, and I love what he talks about Tiger, and he says, Rudy, the first coach, taught him to have arc, and John L. Selmo, the second coach, taught him to have depth, and Butch, when he got him, added width, and that's basically the equation for Tiger. And, you know, we've seen all his swings. I've watched him since he was 4. He grew up near the same city as I. I've seen all his swing. We've got to practice with him a bunch. Swing's changed a lot, but still got big arc. And he's still got a pretty deep turn, you know, and still got a pretty wide motion. And he's won 80 plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at Tiger and pretty much really any time. You know, it changed. His takeaway certainly changed under Sean Foley. Sean and I have talked about that a lot. But for the most part, it was really wide. And it looked a lot like Jack. I'd say Jack, early Jack, 65, 66. Looked a lot like Jack. Looked a lot like Norman. Looked a lot like Babe Saharius. You know, these are, at least in my view, these are commonalities of great drivers. They've got a lot of width. When I asked Butch what he taught Tiger, he said that he had, in watching Davis Love III hit golf balls, the idea of width really resonated with Butch. And he never lost that. And this, I think this is a part of Butch Harmon's genius, is that he learns from his students, and he's not afraid to share some great attribute of one student of his with another. He does this with Jose Maria Olazabal's chipping. He'll talk about particular aspects of his chipping, and he'll share that with others. But as it relates to width, he said that he basically gave Tiger Woods Davis Love's width. I'd say that's pretty spot on if you look at Davis Love, you know, about halfway back, left arm parallel. There's a lot of width there. You know, watching Jack Nicklaus, there's a lot of width there. And I think that has a lot of advantages. You know, just get you moving, get your hands high. And again, I love a lot of flat golf swings too. I do. I mean, you know, yeah, watch Kevin Kisner hit a golf ball. It's beautiful, for sure. You know, it's just that, generally speaking, upright golf swings, in my view, have hit it farther and hit it higher, and they've endured, I would say.
Yeah, I noticed this a lot. Like, you know, there's different categories in Tour. There's C, B, and A, and it almost feels like the top 10 players in the world will be just Category 1. And from getting to play those practice rounds with those guys a lot the last 4 or 5 years, or with John Cook back in the day as well, too, and seeing the best players, one thing I can tell you for sure, and I want you to comment on this, the best players are doing less. There's less rabbit hole. They're not changing as much. They're not walking on the green and looking for a new putter. They're not changing their shaft. They're just kind of staying in their box, and they're doing the box. And it's a long year, and by the end of the year, they're doing their stuff even simpler. And as we talked about earlier, they're hitting 38 golf balls rather than 48 golf balls. And it just seems simpler. And then everybody else is, throughout the year, searching to get better as the year goes on, and they want to catch the guys that are in Category 1. So will you expound on that, please?
Well, I've always said, you know, everything being equal, experience will make you a better player. So it stands to reason until there's physiological decline, which, you know, you can debate about when that happens, but generally speaking, mid-30s as a golfer, it's going to start happening. Experience is going to make you better. I've always said that there's the need to get better, or the desire to get better and the desire to change, they sound similar, but they're not. You know, you can get better by thinking, by not thinking. You can get better by visualization, learning how to breathe. You can get better by resting. You can get better by working out. All of those things can make you a better player. But the desire to change just for the sake of change, for an aesthetic reason, you know, that's a hell of a risk. And when I speak about that, I'm speaking about something that I know a lot about, because I made a lot of changes that were, maybe they were rooted in biomechanics, but it was, you know, we know so much more now than we did 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was trying to make a living playing golf. But for the most part...
Can I wait for this point right here? Regrets on that. If you had to do 2 things over again, and if you could categorize it like that, what would be the 2? Yeah,
and look, I'm not criticizing teachers. I did this of my own volition, and they certainly didn't have, they weren't setting out to limit my turn.
Nobody was going to push you off the cliff.
Yeah, but you know, when I remember I was, you know, a really good player in college, and I looked up one day, and there were several teachers behind me, and Most all of them seemed to want me to keep flex in my right leg. And it seemed a consensus of all these teachers. I kept running into teacher after teacher after teacher that wanted me to keep. And that was very much in vogue. And I could probably, if we dug down deep on that, you can go right to 5 fundamentals. And you can see where Hogan talks about not moving his right knee. He talks about resisting with his lower body. Now, these are things that he talked about and wrote about, but he definitely did not do. But they didn't have YouTube when I was standing there being told to keep the flex in my right leg. So the more I kept flexing my right leg, the less I could turn. And the less I could turn my lower body, the less I could turn my upper body. So when you say regrets, when I was in college, I tried to swing as big as I could, get my hands as high as I could, and I tried to release the club as fast as I could, and I tried to hit it as high as I could.
I saw footage of you 2 nights ago, and it looked like JT when you were in college.
Yeah, when I was in college.
Yes, you looked slighter in frame,
yes.
Club up for sure.
Right.
And definitely speedy through the ball, and it did look like you're trying to hit it over a building.
Yeah, and I remember I had a golden ram 1 iron, and a drill for me was to go out and hit 200, 300, 400 golf balls and try to hit it as high as I could, as high and as hard as I could. And it's funny, when I grew up, Mo Martin, I was just talking to Mo Martin. Is Mo still here? But what a golf swing, by the way. Good gracious. And this is just testament to how easy it is to, and how we all differ. Like Mo learned a lot from 5 lessons. She read that book and got better. I read it and got worse. And everybody that I grew up with, I grew up in Irving, Texas. And, I could go over every now and then and watch Ben Hogan hit golf balls at Shady Oaks. And when I read that book, and he talked about supination through the ball with a weak grip. So I grew up around people with weak grips who were rollers and supinators who hit toe hooks all day long. Because when I read that book, and he's talking about supinating, which is this movement, that leads to that sort of look to a release. Well, now if you get on YouTube, you can very clearly see that Hogan did not do that. His release went from bowed, not supinated, I would argue, to extended. And that's why his face is wide open right here, or square to his spine, I would say. He wasn't a roller. But when you read supinate, and you see him making this move, and you see the drawings, I thought, well, that's how you hit a golf shot. But everybody around me hit hooks doing that. And they hit it all over the place doing that. I didn't see anybody hitting it great doing that. So I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm quitting that. I can't play golf like that. But I read somewhere where, I think it was Freddie Couples talked, like his rookie year on tour. He said what he tried to do was get the club on his left shoulder as fast as he could. And I thought, well, let me try that, And, as fast as I could, and all of a sudden the ball just went to another window. Just went like that. I thought, well, that works. I don't know what that is, but that works. But, all of a sudden you get extension in that left wrist, and you get a different release. Now I would say it was a lower rate of closure. But the ball just went right where I wanted it to go, and it didn't stop going where I wanted it to go. So it was a very simple thought for me that I had. So, in an effort to get my hands high and turn as much as I could, no doubt I was not having a straight trail leg, but flex came out of it. Big hip turn, high hands. And, simple thoughts, like I would mess around with keeping my back on my target, in transition, which, that's a swing thought that's never not helped. Like 100 out of 100 times, 1,000 out of 1,000 times. Every single time I've ever thought that, I've hit the ball better. I remember one time I was on the range at Moline, not hitting it particularly well, grinding away, and, as I'm setting up, I see feet right there. And I look up, and it was Mac O'Grady. And I said, hey, Mac. He goes, keep hitting. And I hit a couple more, and I was hitting a 3-iron, and too low, and just nothing on it. And he took the butt end of his club, and he just turned my chin to the right. He was like, he goes, keep your head right there in transition. And I smoked it. Completely different trajectory, flushed it. And that's, that kept my back on the target. That's how I rationalize it now. It's like, keeping my head there. And I would argue that's a commonality of, again, this is where you throw out an axiom. And of course, Annika and David Duvall did it differently. But by and large, a commonality of the greatest players of all time is that their head is cocked to the right in the backswing, and it stays there in transition, which I think has the added benefit of keeping your back on the target. And, you know, I finished second that week at Moline. David Thomas made a putt on the last hole from about 30 feet and beat me. But I smoked it. Would I have done that if Mac O'Grady hadn't, in like 1 second, and off he went, you know, there he goes. That's all he did, was passing by made me a hell of a player. You know, and that's, you know, that's, to me, I thought, well, now that's how good teaching can get, you know. That's a player just recognizing something that doesn't look right. A buddy of mine grew up in El Paso, Texas, grew up playing golf with Lee Trevino and Orville Moody. Still maintains that Orville hit the ball better than Lee Trevino, by the way, and even says it to Lee. But he said one time he was hitting golf balls. He eventually got on the tour, and he was hitting balls, and Orville was walking by, and Orville admittedly doesn't know. You know, he would always say he didn't know anything about the golf swing, but my buddy said to Orville, take a look. I'm hitting it like crap, and he said Orville watched him hit 3 or 4 shots, and he just grabbed a golf ball, grabbed the tee, and moved it, you know, a little forward, a little more up, and a little more further away from him. And my buddy, you know, flushed it. And my buddy's name was Jack Harden. And he said, what did that do? And Orville goes, I don't have any idea. He goes, I just know it looks better. And off he went. And you know, that was Orville. It was like, I just look at it, and it didn't look right, and that ball should be there, and you're not there. And he flushed it. You know, teaching used to be, I think, more anecdotal and whimsical, like that. And now, as I've said many times, I think teaching has gotten markedly better because we can see better. And everybody in the world, you know, I think social media works like peer review. You have an idea, you put it out there, your idea improves by debate.
Yeah, we could go on that one, right? I also feel like players like grow up 10 years in front of themselves, meaning all those kids on tour, all those kids that were at the Ryder Cup, they're Tiger babies, you know? And you kind of grew up in that, I call it the Wake Forest Houston squad, you know, but some of them didn't go there, but you grew up with, as your contemporaries, Fred, 10 years older than you, Payne, John Cook, O'Meara, Hallberg, Peter Jacobson, like those are your guys. Curtis Strange, Jay Haas.
Yeah,
and when you think about them, they're all, maybe Payne a little different, but all those guys almost, maybe Fred a little different, but almost those guys all are the same player. Controllers, repeating golf swings, beautiful pace and rhythm, made it look a little different every year. The game has changed so much from that.
Yeah.
Talk about them, and then talk about where the game has gone from there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with equipment and the golf ball. You know, because the golf ball spun so much, because the equipment was so unforgiving, you would get slapped in the face very quickly if you got out of whack. That's one of the reasons why, sidebar, a friend of mine, Jack Harden, who I was just talking about, was talking to Jimmy Walker one day, because they're great buds, and Jimmy Walker was using a cavity back iron, and, you know, he was 150th in the world or something. And my buddy said to him, he's like, listen, you know, I don't know anything about your golf swing. I don't know how to make it better, but I know how to make you a better player. And so, you know, Jimmy's all ears, and he said, what? He said, next time you get at a tour event, just walk down the range with the world rankings and look at the top 10 players in the world. Look at their irons and look at your irons. They play blades, you play cavity backs. They're getting feedback, you're not. And he goes, it may scare the hell out of you to put blades in the bag, but you're going to get better feedback, and you're going to be a better player. Jimmy Walker put blades in the bag, won a major championship, became a top 10 player in the world. Are the two related? I think they are. He also, in there, started working with Butch Harmon at Jack's insistence, too. So all those things began to happen. But in general, when I was growing up, you know, there were tons of Tom Kites and Corey Pavins. I grew up, most of the players that you mentioned were a little older than me. You know, Andrew McGee, Mark Brooks, Willie Wood, Corey Pavin. These were sort of my peers. But they were, for the most part, control players. And they covered the ball. They got on top of it and covered it. You know, now with the equipment, you're meant to hit it higher on the face and hit the ball higher. guys are less covering it, they're more behind it, and it's far more about power than control, although we have new metrics to measure control, strokes gained, but you know, there were few power players. Greg Norman, of course. Bruce Litsky is a very underrated power player, an underrated driver of the golf ball. He was very much in the class of Greg Norman, in my view. Then John Daly came along, and you know, the solid core golf ball came along, and things began to change. You know, Nick Price was a control player, but when he went to a solid core golf ball, which he did in the early 90s, he went from being about 50th or 40th in driving distance to about 6th. And he picked up not quite 20 yards, but we know now that do all the metrics, if you pick up 20 yards, it's roughly 3/4 of a shot, that everything else stays the same, that you're going to get better. Nick Price switched to a solid core golf ball, got about 3/4 of a shot better, went from being 30th or 40th in the world to number 1 in the world. Nobody really paid attention to him switching to that golf ball. Mark O'Meara did a very similar thing. He switched to a solid core golf ball, won 2 majors in 1998. Nobody really paid attention to Mark O'Meara switching to a solid core golf ball, except for Tiger. Tiger did, because they're buds. Tiger started working with his equipment company, ball company at the time, Bridgestone, to make such a golf ball. He put that golf ball in play about 3 weeks before the U.S. Open in 2000. Won by 15, won by 8, won all the majors that year, won the Players, and everybody paid attention. And at the end of that year, Titleist came out with a Pro V1. So the game changed because all of a sudden the ball launched higher. You couldn't hit as many fairways. It became more about power. So yes, the game has changed drastically, and the type of player that you see, yeah, I mean, there's still room for Matt Kuchars and Webb Simpsons and David Toms and Zach Johnsons. Those guys, there's Steve Strickers, there's still room for those guys. But I don't see them dominating. You know, Tom Kite, I was in college at the time, I think it was 82. He played 26 tournaments, had 23 top 10s, something along those lines. Won 1 time, but led the moneyless. You know, there were just a heck of a lot more players, it seemed like, who were plotters and not power players. And that began to change in the 90s, but certainly it's night and day different now.
Yeah, I would say just with our players, we're not looking at fairway accuracy as a stat anymore. That one's blocked out. It doesn't matter anymore as long as greens and regulation percentage doesn't go down. So I think that's an operative one for you. If you got somebody at their fairways are off and they're hitting more greens, and let them hit it harder. And that's kind of what's going on. And they're so good with their wedges, and they're so good at when they don't have a shot, knowing when to hold them and when to fold them and hitting into the right spot, that they're making their pars that way off a bad drive as opposed to struggling to make a par with a 6-iron as opposed to a sand wedge.
Yeah. I talked to a manager, a pretty big-time manager a few years ago, and I said, you know, all the metrics that you have, what do you look at first when you're considering a player? He said, ball speed. 100% ball speed. If they're not sending it, you know, we look at our upside as not being what it otherwise could be. You know, there are exceptions again to that. Victor Hovland comes along. You know, he doesn't have. It's good ball speed for sure. It's world-class ball speed, but it's not 185 miles an hour ball speed. You know, but Victor is a guy who comes along and does so many different things that are control points. You know, it's hard to ignore what Victor Hovland could do with a golf ball.
I can't believe how hard he's swinging at it. It's unbelievable. We've drawn him a bunch. I've watched him a bunch. He's not going to last, this kid. He is fearless. And not doing everything perfect yet. His short game is so-so. He's a little streaky with the putter, but he's putting some scores and some numbers up. Yeah,
you know, he's an example of, you know, again, I'll go back to, if you go back to 5 lessons and you look at the drawings of where Hogan's arms are at impact, and you look at the crux of his elbow, it's pointing towards the sky. You know, and he talks about having the feeling of the elbows together and the inside of your elbow pointing towards the sky. But now, obviously, there's not a lot of high-speed video of Hogan, but you can find a little, and you can tell, well, his arms are not in that position at impact. And of course they're not, because nobody in their right mind would want their arms pointed towards the sky at impact, because it allows you so much mobility all the way through the shot, and of course you can flip your hand over like that. But if you point your elbow at the target, you can't move your hand past that. You can't do it. Bryson DeChambeau talks about this a lot with end of range, he calls it, because he tries to get to a position to where he cannot turn his arm any more than that. You can do this if you're sitting in your car and you grab the steering wheel down at the bottom like this, right? You grab the steering wheel and it's like, how far can you move that steering wheel? You can turn it all the way over like that. But if you grab that steering wheel right like that, how far can you move that steering wheel? Not very far. You don't have a lot of range of mobility, and that's what Bryson DeChambeau is trying to do. Get his elbow pointed at the target, his arm off his chest, his left arm broken, not straight, just so that he can barely get his arm past there, end of range. Well, that's what Victor Hovland does, and Bryson says he got it from Jordan Spieth, but he could have just as easily have gotten it from Victor Hovland, because nobody does that better than Victor Hovland, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in the game who hits it straighter than Victor Hovland, where the elbow's pointed at the target, the arm's off the chest, the left arm's bent, and he gets that amazing release right there because he gets extension through here. But whether he talks about end of motion or not, his left hand, if you've got your elbow pointed at the target, your range of motion is less than if your inside of your arm is pointed towards the sky.
Mm-hmm. Well stated. What is Nick? What is Hoekster's speed again? What's his speed? Driver speed?
Whose speed?
We're asking this about this kid that we got an 18-year-old kid at home that is underdeveloped physically. He's a big boy. He's 6'3", and he weighs probably 200 pounds soaking wet, and his feet are big, and he hasn't grown yet. And he literally last year was going, 115, and now he's going 130, and he's hitting it at places on our golf course. We got a couple places on our golf course where they're old Tillinghast design, and you have to hit it up like, to a shape bunker, and he's hitting it over the shape bunker and up on hills there where we haven't seen him hit before. And I'm hearing about that all the time. That's just one of our kids. I'm hearing it from everybody I talk to. I've had about 10 of you come up and say, hey, good kid, it's like 123 or 124 or 125. So,
well, look, the secret's out. I think force plates had I'd give a tip of my cap to force plates when you start to see the pressure and where you're putting it in the ground. I think that's part of it. But another part of it is, look, I think the idea of resisting with the lower body is dead. When I played the tour, I walked down, you couldn't find anybody that didn't resist. And so when I started arguing against resistance, the typical debate or the retort to me would be, everybody does it. And my retort to that was, look, if everybody chooses to run carrying a 50-pound dumbbell 100 meters, somebody will win.
yeah.
And you will call them the fastest, but they're not running as fast as they could run.
Yeah.
Yes, they will win, but none of these players on the tour who are resisting, this was my debate, and again, I listen to counters to it all the time, but nobody who is resisting is hitting the ball as far as they can. And typically what I'll hear or see when I see a golf swing with resistance explained is that it's efficient. And that's the word, the catchphrase they'll use. But if you actually read the definition of efficient, they always leave out half of it. It is maximum productivity with the fewest wasted motions. So nobody who is resisting...
Would you repeat that?
Maximum productivity with the fewest wasted motions, with the least wasted motion. So if you're looking for maximum productivity, and then again, the least wasted motion, you're not going to do it with resistance. You're not going to get maximum productivity out of there. That's my debate. That's my sweet tooth for sure. And I think Bryson came along and I think resoundingly proved that. If you look at Dustin Johnson, who does resist, mind you, he gets a beautiful turn with his hips. He's that flexible. But that's not to say he couldn't turn more. If you look at Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka, and then you look at Bryson DeChambeau, the difference between Bryson DeChambeau's club head speed and Dustin Johnson's is the difference between Dustin Johnson's and Brian Gay.
That's great.
That's how much faster Bryson DeChambeau swings than Dustin Johnson. Now, could Dustin Johnson swing farther if he resisted less, or hit it farther if he resisted less? I certainly think he could. Would that make him a better player? It's debatable. But if you're looking for maximum productivity, why would you try to resist with the lower body?
Yeah, and even on that too, and this is kind of another spin-off of that too, I would say that players are such better athletes in the way they're taking care of themselves from the minute they wake up and they're eating with a chef, and then they're going to physio, and then they're having a trainer, and then they're hitting golf balls, and they're reversing the cycle and doing that all day long. And the athlete looks different. We didn't have very many athletes that look like Dustin Johnson when you were talking about over Moody earlier, or Lee Trevino. You don't look at them like the athlete that you see now. Victor Hovland, he could arguably play any sport. He certainly looks like a soccer player. He's fit and cut as can be. So I think the players are making more speed with their bodies, so they get more efficiency that way by the fact that they're better athletes in the way that they move. You concur with that?
100%. Golfers look like speed swimmers now. When I came out on tour, every tour player looked like me. They were 5'9", 5'10". They weighed 160, 65 pounds. There were the exceptions, and those exceptions were, they hit it 9 miles. But, most everybody was 5'9", 5'10". Now they're 6'2", 180, 185. And I was doing some stuff last week with the TPI guy by the name of Sean Drake, and he's putting me through these, close your eyes, stand on 1 foot. This foot, that foot. Tour player averages 25 seconds. Talking about, facets of the game and fitness that were completely unknown. When I was growing up, it was still fitness is bad for you, slows you down. And look, over the years, have I argued against fitness? Occasionally, yes. When you put on bulk, like I would argue, Tiger Woods did not get faster when he put on bulk. He got slower, and the data clearly shows that. Was it good for him? His body broke down. I don't know. But that's not to say that being in shape, being flexible, being quick, I always would argue that Tiger, he traded speed for strength. And which of the two would you rather have? Personally, I would rather have speed. When Tiger was 1996, when he played in the Masters, he averaged 346 yards off the tee, and that's when he played a practice round with Jack and Tiger. He played a practice round with Jack and Arnold, and they both finished the practice round and said, Tiger's going to win more Masters than both of us combined. They had won 10 combined, so they were predicting more than that. Imagine playing with a kid who's driving at 350 yards in 1996. The next longest drive average that week was 300 yards. So he's 50 yards longer than the next average. So was Tiger faster when he put bulk on? I don't think so. The data doesn't show that. But that's not to say working out is amazing. Of course, you just need to train smarter. And I think a lot of people learned from Tiger in that regard.
Yeah, and I think on the training smarter too, having dinner with Brett McCabe the other night, and he said it in his speech, for the mind, he feels like we're 20 years from really understanding as much as we could know about the mind. That's his humble estimation. And I would also say in the training, I just feel like in golf training, and I know some of you are TPI certified, and you all have trainers, and all my guys and girls, they have trainers as well. So I love them, and the trainer is an important part of the village that we talk about. And I think they're better than they've ever been. One thing I want to compliment you all on is I think we've done a great job of staying with the pace of the game. What you're doing today, the way that you are, the way that you look, the way that you see it, the way that you educate yourself, I think that you're with the pace of the game, and it's really important. And those other portions are really important cogs in the wheel. To that, if you're speaking to this group out here, and I think, do I have a 21 or 22-year-old, 23, 24? Yeah, right there. And do I have an 80-year-old here? Got anybody in their 70s? Attaboy, Jim. There we go. Good. You're not in your 70s. Bill, you either. Yeah. Anyways, we got 22 or 3 to somebody in their 70s here. How do we get better? And are we getting better, in your opinion? I know I said it from my point, but I'd like to hear that. And how do we get better?
I used to play with a fellow by the name of Dr. McMahon. He was in his 70s when I started playing golf with him, and he broke his age almost every single day that I played with him, and he could hit it 230, 240. He smoked it, putted his rear off, and he was always after me to send him to a teacher. This was at the height of my revolving door of teachers. And he wanted me to send him to Ledbetter or McLean or Bob Tosky or anybody. And we were in San Antonio at the time, and he, I kept thinking, good God, I can't imagine what a teacher would help you with. I never really said that to him because he was a perfectionist. So I called Harvey Pinnock and asked Harvey if he would see Dr. McMahon. Dr. McMahon drove up about a month later and spent the day with him. And I saw Dr. McMahon a couple weeks later, and I said, well, how did your lesson go? And he said, and I'm quoting, he said, Harvey doesn't know shit about the swing. And, and I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, I drove all the way up there. He goes, I go out on the range. He comes out there and he says, let me see you hit a few, Dr. McMahon. And he goes, so I hit some. And then he said, well, let me see you hit a few more. And he goes, so I hit a few more. And then he goes, well, let me see you hit a few more. And I hit a few more. And then after about 30 shots, he said, Harvey looked at me and he goes, Dr. McMahon, you can beat 99.9% of the doctors in this world, and that's as good as you need to be. And he walked off. And I thought, well, hell, that's what I should have told him. I was like, who's going to make you better? But of course, we all think we can get better. As you get older, where can you improve? I've played with people who are 60, 70 years old who smoke it because they're in the gym and they're fit and they're vibrant. You go to the doctor and make sure your testosterone levels are right, or you're as healthy as you need to be. And we're learning more and more about how important recovery is. And I think it's important to keep a youthful outlook. And a buddy of mine always says, I'm not going to let the old man in. I think that's a great line. It's like, don't let them in, it helps to play with young kids. It helps. I play a fair bit with Gary McCord. Gary plays with Jamie Sidlowski, and he plays with Paul Casey, and he plays with all these kids. And Gary acts like, I don't know how Gary would be. Gary would be close to 70. Gary acts like he's 19. He tries to hit it, long drive, let's have a long drive here. He's trying to send it. There's always breakthroughs in pitching and chipping. I think we're getting better understanding of that. I think part of that is evidenced by Tiger Woods figuring out the problems that he had with his short game. But, stay young, play with young kids, stay fit, because if you're fit and you're mobile, you can move, and you can't really do much if you can't move.
That 23-year-old over there, young man, he might coach a tour player next week, and he might coach somebody that's never played before. And that young lady that said she was in her 70s in the orange out there, she might coach a tour player next week, and she might coach somebody that's never played before. So we got a big wide range in here. How do we become better coaches? Like, if you had to give one tip in here, knowing that how do we become better coaches?
Well, I've argued for years that we have the ability now to quantify coaching in a way that's never been done before. And I've talked to the PGA of America about this, and before COVID hit, they were going to roll something out along these lines where they were going to use data to find out who the best coaches were. Right now, it's anecdotal. And certainly those opinions are educated opinions, no question about it. But I think with the ability to measure who the best coaches are, and you can do that in any number of ways, who's having the most success generating club head speed with people in their 40s or 50s or 60s, or who's having the most success with improving short games. And finally you get down to who's having the biggest success in scoring handicaps. And it's not to embarrass anybody. It is just to find out who the best teachers are, really. When I look at the teaching list now, of course, there's a lot of names there, and I know them, a lot of them. I've spent time with them. But maybe the best teacher is an 82-year-old woman teaching off mats in Nebraska. But we don't know until we measure. And imagine if it were somebody we'd never heard of, the whole world would just beat a path to the door. I think what we would find out is that the best teachers would be teaching more holistically. It would be not position-oriented, it would be feel-oriented, or it'd be movement-oriented. It'd be about triggers. It would be about looking and shooting. It would be about, short game nuances. It would be about bunker nuances. It would be about putting. And it would be far more holistic. I don't know that to be the case because the data doesn't exist. But when I look at a teacher like you, and believe I don't think we've met, but I've been a big fan of yours for a long time because I look at the players, I've played with the players that you coach. They don't swing alike. They don't look alike. They don't look like they're playing by rote. They don't look like they're playing golf swing. They look like they're playing the game. And I tend to think I think that's the best way to teach. I would say the same thing about Butch. His teachers don't look the same, or his players don't look the same. Randy Smith in Dallas, none of his players look like they're being taught a method.
Great teacher.
I love Randy. I look at his players. They all look, you look at Harrison Frazier, who didn't win on tour, but got on tour. Beautiful golf swing, upright, smoked it. Great driver of the golf ball.
Hold that thought. Don't leave. I got a great one. Randy Smith at the Ryder Cup. We stay at the Kohlers. They put the coaches in one spot, players in the other. We're in a bubble. And we get in the shower, the first morning there, turn the shower on. There are 17 faucets in this shower. I'm like, whoa, ducking like that. It's going everywhere, So Randy's pretty funny. Brandel knows him. He's really funny. We're on the bus driving the course, and Randy all of a sudden gets everybody's attention. He goes, damn, he goes, I got to see Herb Kohler today. He goes, I need a little more data on how to take a shower at one of these hotels it is.
He's a good old Texas
Keep
boy.
going.
I was just going to say, if you look at Justin Leonard's golf swing, you'd never think that the same person that taught Justin Leonard's golf swing taught Harrison Frazier's golf swing, or Ryan Palmer's golf swing. I mean, you can't get any more different than Ryan Palmer's golf swing and Justin Leonard's golf swing. But those two came out of the same club, taught by the same man, from a junior program.
And Scotty's special.
And Scotty Scheffler. Look at Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, he's really special.
Scotty Scheffler hits it high and straight, and he's fearless, taught by Randy Smith. So, how do you get better at anything? I think energy and passion. You wake up every morning and realize, there's something you don't know, and dive in and spend time, debating and talking. I think, unfortunately, the world's so divisive that people don't often talk to or run into or hang out with people that disagree with them. But I think we get better by disputation. I think we get better by debate. I think they make your ideas better. I have changed my mind a million times about players, about swings, about ideas. When I first started talking about golf swing on TV, I thought a big transitional drop was a bad thing. Jack always said, stay tall. But, I couldn't, of course, there are players that stay tall and hit it beautifully, but who had more transitional drop than Tiger Woods or Lee Trevino?
Or Sergio, for that matter. You talk about
Hogan.
the club getting left behind you, and you shouldn't be dipping down to the ball. And I think you know this statistically, right? Like, he's the best ball hitter in the last 20 years.
Who?
Sergio. I mean, as far
Well,
as
he's one of them.
Yeah, one of the
He's
better.
not in Tiger's class.
Yeah.
He's not in Tiger's class.
But doing all those things, right? The club laying down low.
Right,
and,
in a million years, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
would never do it. I remember somebody just ripping me to no end about talking about Tiger's head dropping, and putting a video and putting my swing up there because I dropped, and Johnny Miller's golf swing and Tiger Woods, who doesn't belong in that. But anyway, we all dropped a lot, and I thought, you never stop learning because we all have biases, and I think, and I'll make mistakes continuously because you just learn as you go. But until you take your ideas out, and kick them around, and see if they stand up to scrutiny, I don't think you're doing yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't do that.
I don't know, in my opinion, your debates and the way that you think about it and the way that you go about it, a lot of people have changed those seats. You seem to be sitting right in the middle, still debating and talking about it and studying and working really hard. Congratulations on that. Let's give him a hand for all that he does for that. It's impressive.
Thank you.
It's impressive.
Thank you.
We, You and I, when we talked a month or two ago, like I felt like that, and I said that it was a rainy day. It felt like we could have talked forever. I think I had some place to go to, and you had some place to go to as well, too. But we talked for a long time, and I think at that time we called each other swing geeks, and somebody last night told me I offended him here by calling them a swing geek, so I apologize to that one person, but you are a swing geek. So,
Yeah,
I
love talking about
and it sounds like it's growing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Yeah.
I think everybody, I would imagine everybody in this room has changed their opinion about the golf swing in the last 10 or 15 years. I certainly has. As data comes in, I get messages constantly from teachers who, will contradict something I say on the air. John Tattersall, how many people in here know John Tattersall or know of him? He's doing a deep dive now about, how, when the arms are up, way up here above the head. I talk all the time about how, when they come in, it helps you turn faster. It's a bit like a figure skater. He sends me reams of data that that's not the case, that the arms are not closer together. And look, that's his sweet spot. He loves it. And I've yet to digest all the data, but that's not to say that I'm not going to learn something when I do, which will change the way I talk about the golf swing.
Great answer there. Let's switch gears a little bit. You've done this long enough with competitive golf, and I know that you're probably the major emphasis is the PGA Tour. So we talked a lot today about Symetra Tour and LPGA Tour and how much we think of that. But let's just talk about PGA Tour, and because you're doing it week in and week out, and you're doing all the big tournaments, and you're getting to see it, on the set and get the feel of it. Got an idea who's going to win on Tuesday? I mean, I know you have to.
Do I often have an idea who's going to win on Tuesday?
Yeah. And how often are you right?
Not very. Every Wednesday night we're meant to guess who's going to win a major championship. I get it right occasionally. I would have said 100 times that Phil Mickelson will be the oldest major winner eventually of all time. So that happened. I guess that Colin Morikawa was going to win the Open Championship based upon, whatever data. But here's the thing about golf. The difference between the very best quarterback in the NFL and the worst quarterback and the average quarterback is about 30%. The difference between the best batter in baseball and the worst batter and the average batter is about 20 to 35%. The difference between the very best golfer on the PGA Tour from a scoring average standpoint to the average is about 3%. And it's about 7% to the worst. That's how fine a line it is between the best and the worst golfers in terms of scoring average. And with 156 players teeing off in a tour event at different times of the day, there is no sport that's harder to guess than golf. And if you actually think you know who's going to win on Tuesday, you've lost your mind. We're meant to make a guess, and you can make an educated guess, and every now and then you'll get one right, as I say too, because Frank Nobilo used to hate making guesses, and David Vall didn't like to make guesses. And as I always told Frank, it's like, Frank, nobody remembers when you get it wrong. They'll only remember if you get it right, because it's preposterous to sit there on Tuesday or Wednesday night. If they're smaller fields, then you can look and make a better guess. But for the most part, you look at the obvious things, who's on form, who has a great history on this particular golf course, and then you might look at nuances. Like one of the reasons I feel like I do a better job of picking at Augusta National is because I think there are very specific things that you have to do well at Augusta National.
Correct.
And if you can't do them, you will not win. I think you have to be able to hit a high cut off a draw lie. If you can't do that, you are going to hit pulls with short irons all day long, and you're going to be 50 feet long putting downhill. So when I look at Jordan Spieth and his specific release, the way he releases through the shot, he has a very, he has a chicken wing, obviously, and he doesn't have a lot of rate of closure, and his release is very much like this, which allows him to hit high cuts off hook lies, like at 1, like at 10, like at 13, like at 18. So I look at players like that, and I think, they're going to have a big advantage. I think because Rory swings in to out, often he slams into the hill and hits pulls. So he hits short irons 40 feet long, and he's putting down the hill, and his iron play just isn't as good at Augusta National as it should be. And, you know, of course, every now and then people come along and they disprove that data. You know, it happens. Sergio Garcia, I've always thought he had too much lag. And because he had I've always called Augusta a picker's paradise and a digger's dungeon. Jack Nicklaus hit it straight up in the air. It didn't hardly take a divot. He was a picker. Tiger Woods, he's a picker. Tom Watson, he's a picker. You know, of course, a digger or two has won there, but for the most part, pickers do better on those awkward lies. Then Sergio comes along, lots of forward shaft lean. He's a digger, and he wins there. I certainly wouldn't have picked him to win that week, but out of nowhere, he played his rear off.
Yeah, just agree or not agree, the second shot on the 13 hole at Augusta, because of what the wind's doing in two different directions, and the fact that it's way more like that than you believe, and you do have to hit a cut to that whole location unless you want to hit in those pretty flowers up there. Hardest shot on tour it's a hard shot, right?
Yeah,
We've seen that shot misplayed over history by so many, and we've seen it played great too.
It's the most beautiful. I think everything about that hole is magnetic. I'll tell you a quick story there. In 1999, I played the first 2 rounds with the eventual winner, Jose Maria Olazabal. First 9, he only hit 2 greens. I think he shot 2 under. You know, he was hitting these 4-iron chips and 6-iron chips, and they'd just barely get on the green, and then they'd release out like this. The other guy in our group was Bill Glasson, and I was just mesmerized by watching Jose hit these pitches and chips. And second round, I hit it left on 13. Pin was back left. I'm looking at it. I've got nothing. And it hit me. I thought, I've been watching Jose hit these 4-iron chips. So I pull a 4-iron out, and I get in there. I have never hit this shot. I get in there, and I hit the most beautiful little bump and run that barely gets on the green and stops us this far from the hole. And I act like I do it all the time, right? So you go up, tap in, you're like, yeah, I got that. So the next hole, I'm going down the fairway, and Bill Glasson wasn't a talkative fella at all, intimidating as hell. Hadn't said 2 words to anybody. And all of a sudden, I feel somebody behind me. I turn around. It's Bill. He goes, hey, what'd you hit that chip with on the last hole? And I said, 4-iron. And he goes, oh. He goes, you ever used a 4-iron before like that? I said, no, it's the first time ever. he goes, well, what made you think? I go, I've been watching Jose for a day and a half. We made it look simple.
That's funny.
You know, but I don't even know where the hell I was going with that story, but it was a fun story, wasn't it?
We're gonna go to commercial here. That's what they do on the real set. Yeah.
But no, you know, I'll tell you one more. Jose is just the greatest iron player, and he's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, he kept that back on the target. I mean, even now when I try to keep my back on the target, I think of Jose Maria. We both drove in the same spot on Friday on 11. Pin was back right, and I hit 4-iron, or no, I hit 5-iron, and I never looked left of the right edge of the bunker, and I hit it perfect right there, and Jose was right beside me. He had a great caddy, Brandel was his name, and Jose asked him what I hit, and he said 5-iron. He started to pull out a 5-iron, and Brandel goes, no, it's a 4-iron, and then Jose was like, 4-iron. He goes, it's a 4-iron. Cut it over the water. It's a 4-iron. And Jose fought him and said it's a 5-iron. Anyway, he pulls 4-iron out. And when he pulls it out, he goes, we'll see if you're right. And he hit this cut 4-iron like that far from the hole. And it was just a jaw-dropping shot. And, you know, it was really cool to see a guy who was one of the greatest iron players ever at his peak, at a moment that paid off. He shot 66 that day. It was low, and it was awesome to watch. You know, I never ever forgot that shot.
Cool. I like doing this a lot in these. Let's take you around the board. Let's not put a year there. It can be Bobby Jones if it want to, or it can be, you know, Victor Hovland or anybody in between. Best driver of the golf ball in your mind? We just get one player.
Jack Nicklaus.
Best iron player, long irons.
Tiger Woods.
Middle.
Tiger Woods.
Short.
Tiger Woods.
Okay. Putter. Either one of those two.
You know, that's a tough one. The data is not great, obviously, but it'd be hard pressed to bet against Bobby Locke.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've spent the last 2 years, well, I spent many years before that, but the last 2 years writing a book on putting, which I've submitted. It'll be out, who knows when, but there's a lineage of great putters that goes back to Walter Travis. Walter Travis talked about how to stroke a putt. There's a before and after with Bobby Jones. Before, Walter talked to Bobby Jones, and after. After, Bobby played in, I think, 15 majors and won 11 of them. He also talked to Walter Hagen about how to stroke it. He also talked to Bobby Locke about how to stroke it. And that stroke, that idea, has permeated every great putter for 100 years, from Ben Crenshaw to Tiger Woods to all the way back to Walter Travis. You can trace a lineage of the particular commonalities and strokes. And my best friends are some of the best putting coaches in the world. Faxon is one of my best friends. Stan Utley's another great friend of mine. And we'll sit around and debate this over and over again. They disagree with all those findings that I just put out there, but when I look at their strokes, that's all I see is those commonalities.
When you're walking on the putting green and you see somebody with a stroke that you really like, what does it look like descriptively, please?
What does it look like? It looks intuitive.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
Good one.
And I don't think putting is intuitive, but and I've often said, you'll hear people say, so-and-so is a great putter because he's a great green reader. And of course, that's a huge element to reading greens, or to making putts, is being able to read them correctly. But I think it's backwards. I think that if you're a great putter, in other words, if you've long ago put technical aspects of the putting stroke to bed, you're not thinking about them anymore, right? So you're not hung up in your grip or the stroke, or you're not looking at it. You can spend that time and that energy reading greens and work yourself into the green and work yourself into the read. We often see Tiger Woods make that putt at the TPC Sawgrass on Saturday. We'll see it 1,000 times this year at the Players' Championship. We never ever don't see it, but you rarely see the minute and a half that preceded that putt. And that's where Tiger Woods walks that green 360 degrees, and then when he gets over it, and again, you won't see this either, but when he gets over it, you can find it on YouTube. He stands over it and just putts with, just makes practice strokes with his right hand only. Makes 3 or 4 practice strokes, and then he gets in, and then he goes, and he makes the putt. Now, is Tiger Woods a great green reader? Yeah, amazing. But I think a big aspect of being able to read greens, being a great green reader and picking up all the nuances you need to pick up, is not thinking about your putting stroke. Because if you're thinking about your putting stroke, you're going to miss the sheen, you're going to miss your body chemistry, you're not going to match the two, you're going to miss something. And that, to me, is why great putters are great green readers, is because they've long ago quit thinking about the mechanics of the stroke, and so that they can pour themselves into the read.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't really got to go back and watch the YouTubes of all these things a couple little thing when I remember thing, but I will go back right here to hear that couple, 3 paragraphs about putting. That was beautiful. That was really cool. Thanks. The Ryder Cup, that team, huh? I mean, I can tell you from, the up close and personal part, and this isn't my show, this is your show, but it was super, super special. This is a 2-part question. The team was something else, right? And then is the game in good hands on that tour because of that team going forward from our standpoint as a country? Yes.
I think a lot of those players grew up watching the U.S. get pummeled in the Ryder Cup. And so they go there, I think, with a bit of the mentality that the European team has used so successfully, is this underdog mentality, nothing to lose. The only difference is that they go there with a nothing to lose, an underdog mentality, but as far superior golfers on the whole. Their average world rank was like 8 and change. there's never been a team assembled in the world ranking era anywhere close to the team that the U.S. did, brought over there. I think Padraig Harrington was gambling a bit. He had some of his stalwarts that had been so instrumental, hugely instrumental in the success of the European side, but they were older. They were 45, 43, 40, I think 45 was the oldest, the Westwood. But, 3 or 4 of them were older and, don't hit it as far, don't putt as well. And you start to just add all that up and look where they are. They were playing at home. They were playing on a golf course that really does differentiate between great, good, and poor players. It was a perfect scenario for the U.S. side. You talk about predicting. You don't often get those right, but I thought it was going to be a blowout, and it was a blowout. But I didn't feel like that was that hard to predict.
Yeah, I'm on a bit attorney-client privilege there, and I felt like that was an inside the ropes thing for the team room or all that start. But I can tell you with Patrick, he is not saying very much. That's not in a whisper to me when we're out there. He's whispering at me all the time, and it's normally about something besides golf. But when we're going to play, it's business time. Like, he's getting it on. And we played second on the singles match, and Xander played first. And they were going to go either way, and they flipped a coin to see who went 1 and 2. So Xander warmed up, and we kind of warmed up with him as we did all week, or we always do. And then Patrick warmed up, and then Patrick stopped at each guy's that he talked to, and there was a couple explicits in, and they're like, "Let's do your stuff." And it was cool. I've never seen that happen from him before, meaning they were primal warrior, and they wanted to win. And it was really cool. It was neat to see. And I think that's what Europe did to us for a while. And they wanted to get 20 points, and they wanted to break the record, and it was fun. And then on the second part of that question, a lot of future of the game in that right there with those guys for us, for our country, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's rare when you see a player come along that has it all. And that's Patrick Cantlay. That's Xander Schauffele. Those are incredible golf swings. But beyond that, when you look at a Justin Thomas, you just can't say enough good things about Justin Thomas. He was taught by a PGA professional. His father, Mike, came up on our set the year he won the PGA Championship in 2017 at Quail Hollow. And I remember asking his father, what he taught him? And he said, look, I taught him the grip and the setup and ball position. And then I said, go out there and create. And he said he'd walk out there, and Justin's 6, 7 years old, and he's like, Dad, watch this. I'm going to hit a high slice. Watch this. Dad, I'm going to hit a low hook. Watch it. He was like at 5 or 6, 7 years old. The kid was precocious. He was out there creating. And that to me is the essence of golf. It's like, you think about that. At a very early age, he wasn't out there going, Dad, tell me if I'm down the line. Tell me if the club head's a little inside. Tell me if the grip's right. No, he was out there creating, and that's the essence. Eons ago, Scientific America did this study to find out what the most efficient species at locomotion was in the world. In other words, how many kilocalories someone burned, or an animal or anything burned going from point A to point B, and they found out that the condor was the most efficient species on the planet, and that human beings fell well down the list. But when you measured a human being on a bike, he blew the condor away. And that's what we are. We're creation. We're meant to create. We're meant to innovate, to think, and that's when you see a golfer who's out on the golf course creating, coming up with shots in a tough spot. He's got to match his body to the land. You got to pick it up here. You got to cut it over this. That's golf, and that's Justin Thomas. Do I love his golf swing? Yes, absolutely. I could talk for hours about how much I love his golf swing.
Stole your golf swing when you were in college.
Yeah, I wasn't that. I didn't do it quite like that. I wasn't that good. But he creates. He plays the game. He plays it like Tiger. He really does. I see why Tiger and Justin are such good buddies. Bones, who's now going to go caddy for Justin Thomas. Bones is a friend of mine. I reached out to Bones and said, hey, congrats. That's really cool. We're going to miss you in TV, because I thought Bones was amazing. He said, I've been out here watching these guys forever. He goes, there was only one player I would leave TV to go caddy for, and that was Justin Thomas. And I was like, yep.
That's a big call. That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Last one for you here, then we'll say a couple words to everybody. We always talk about this one, you know, if you like it, you got a chance to be good. If you love it, you got a chance to be pretty good. If you're in love with it, you got a chance to be great at everything that we do. You're great at what you do. Obviously, you're in love with it, and can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, you know, TV is, it's a weird world. You know, when I first started in TV was 2003, and I had, you know, I think a gift to be able to work with Mike Tirico. And I, you know, Tirico, he's such a sweetheart of a guy. It's not even fair that somebody can be that competent and that considerate and socially aware, but he is. And he would just walk by every now and then, and he'd be like, you know, sit up, you know, sit up. He'd be like, it'll help your instrument. It'll help you speak better, you know. So he would always just have, you know, nice things to say. But I remember, you know, one night we were talking about a career in TV, and he said, look, if you do your job right, half the people are going to hate you, and half the people are going to love you. He said, you know, I never, ever thought of myself as controversial. I never did growing up. I love people. I love being around people. I love to sit back and listen. I'm not hugely competitive in games. But I did grow up in a family that debated a lot. Everybody in my family loves to debate. And so I've always enjoyed listening and thinking about, you know, arguments here and there. But I never thought of myself as particularly controversial. But Tirico was like, if you do your job right, if you approach a subject 360 degrees and you lay it out there, people are going to make up their own mind. But half of them are going to just hate you, and half of them are going to like you. And he's like, don't worry about it. But the thing I'll say about TV is that you can finish a show and you think you did a great job, or you think you did it right, or you had a nice show, and there'll be people, you know, even producers will say, you could have done this well, you could have done that well, you could have done this better. You'll finish the show and you think you stink. And I'll hurdle things in my house to turn off the TV if I'm on it, because I don't want to hear my voice. I gave birth to whatever it is I said, and I don't think anybody likes to hear or see themselves on TV, at least nobody I really know. But invariably when I think I did something bad, or it was a bad show and it happens to pop up, I'll think, it wasn't that bad. But the one thing about TV is I determined early on, because it is such a subjective world. Golf is great. You put 65 on the board, nobody can tell you played poorly.
Objective.
Yeah, it's objective, purely objective. And it's an individual selfish game. Okay, so it's just you and that score, and nobody can say you played poorly if you shot 65. But you finish a TV show and people are going to love it and they're going to hate it. So I thought, and I looked around, and it's a pretty insecure world, TV. It really can be. And I thought, I have to come up with my own definition for a good show. And my definition is to know what I need to know. So I need to know the players. And that's not easy. Every week they change teachers. Every week they change caddies. Every week they change their swing. They're working on this club. They're working on that. So it's my job to know that, to dive in and to do my homework, to know who's working on what and with whom and what clubs and all that. That's not easy. That takes a lot of time. To know the golf course, know the history, and then I always remind myself when I'm just getting ready to sit there, just before you go on TV, there's all kinds of chaos. We have shot sheets when we do highlights, so, sometimes they're that thick, all these shots, right? And now you're going to throw to a graphic, and then you're going to throw to a video. And you got somebody in your ear telling you exactly when you're going to throw to that graphic and when you're going to throw to that video. And this person's going to talk before me, and I got to follow him. And should the host redirect me, or should I pick it up from him? And so there's all these things. And so if you let it, it can make you nuts, But I always remember that people are at home watching me in their underwear. And I think, they're just watching. It's just golf, And if I have fun, I'd like to think they're going to have fun. So I always remind myself before we go on the air, I smile, I try to relax, have fun, enjoy yourself. If I prepare as hard as I can and I have fun, that's my definition. And I listen, because the worst thing you can do on TV is to be thinking about what you're going to say, which sounds counterintuitive, but you just have to have it somewhere in your head, because if you're thinking about what you're going to say, I'm going to miss what Jamie just said. And then I'm going to repeat what Jamie just said. And I'm going to miss what Justin Leonard just said. And I may repeat what Justin Leonard just said. And people at home are like, what an idiot. He just said that, you know? And if you listen, you react more naturally and you have more fun. And so that's it. That's all I try to do when I do a show.
Well, I want to tell you, obviously being here and driving over from your home and coming to see us means so much to us, all of us. I think that there was well over a couple hundred people of you that we had an amazing couple days. And we're a small portion of 29,000 people where you have been our Seinfeld or Modern Family, or for me, you know, Monday Night Football. Now I watch your show, and we've all probably seen you more. I'm not going to admit whether I was in my underwear or not, but we've all kind of seen you. We've all kind of seen you grow up through our whole lives, and we're all huge fans. And from Southern California, thank you.
And thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.